God is dead. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote those 3 words, and he was not celebrating. He was sounding an alarm. He predicted the exact crisis you are living through right now. He called it nihilism, and he warned it would take 200 years to fully arrive. We are living inside that prophecy. Turin, Italy, the 3rd of January 1889. A man steps out onto the Piazza Carlo Alberto and sees a coachman whipping a horse that has collapsed in the street. And this man, the fiercest, loneliest thinker of the 19th century, the one who taught humanity to love its fate, runs to the animal, throws his arms around its neck, and weeps. Then he collapses. He will never write another sane word again. Hold that image. We will come back to that street, because it is the most important thing about this story, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the man who diagnosed the death of God broke down embracing a dying horse. But first we have to understand what he saw, because he saw it coming for all of us. If you have ever lain awake with the quiet, corrosive suspicion that nothing you do actually matters, that you keep functioning, keep working, keep scrolling, but somewhere underneath it all a voice is saying, what is the point? Then you have already met the thing Nietzsche spent his life diagnosing. He did not invent that feeling. He was the first to name it, trace it, and predict what it would do to us. He wrote, "What I relate is the history of the next 2 centuries. I describe what is coming, what can no longer come differently, the advent of nihilism." 2 centuries. He wrote that in the 1880s. Do the arithmetic on where that puts us. Nietzsche was the seismograph. He felt the earthquake decades before the ground began to move. This is about that earthquake, what it is, why it happened, why it is still spreading through your life right now, and what Nietzsche believed we must become to survive it. First, we clear away a misunderstanding, because almost everyone gets this wrong. Nihilism is not moody teenagers in black. It is not saying nothing matters to sound deep. In Nietzsche's hands, it is a precise condition, and it wears several forms. There is epistemological nihilism, that knowledge cannot be reached. Cosmic nihilism, that the universe is indifferent or hostile to us. Moral nihilism, that no right or wrong exists at all. But Nietzsche cared most about existential nihilism, because it contains all the others, the claim that life, as a whole, has no intrinsic meaning and no intrinsic value. Now here is the move that makes him a genius instead of just a pessimist. He noticed that human beings are always valuing. It would be almost unrecognizable as a human life to value nothing whatsoever. We are, by nature, creatures who assign worth. So the real question is never whether we value, it is what we value. He gives the definition in its coldest form. Nihilism, he says, is the radical repudiation of value, meaning, and desirability. Not the absence of caring, the collapse of the higher things we once cared about, and our failure to find anything worthy to replace them. It empties the world and leaves the shell standing upright, as if nothing had happened. One honest warning about sources. Much of his most explicit writing on nihilism comes from The Will to Power, a book Nietzsche never actually wrote. It was assembled from his private notebooks after he lost his mind. So we tread carefully. These are fragments he chose not to publish, and they must always be read against the work he released while he was lucid. Keep that in your pocket. Across his work, nihilism wears 3 masks. Nietzsche shows us nihilism as despair, nihilism as disorientation, and nihilism as a lack of higher values. And I'll tell you now, the third one is the one he considered the worst, the one you can see out your own window today. We'll get there, but we have to earn it. The first face is the one everyone pictures. Nietzsche ties it to Arthur Schopenhauer and to Buddhism. The despairing nihilist is not confused about values. He holds them with iron conviction. His conviction is simply that suffering is unbearable and existence is not worth it. For Schopenhauer, the world is a churning ocean of pain. We are flung endlessly between the agony of wanting and, once we get what we wanted, the grey nausea of boredom. His verdict is brutal. It would have been better never to have been born. The Buddhist reaches a parallel conclusion by a gentler road. Existence is suffering, so step off the wheel, detach, extinguish the flame. Nietzsche has enormous respect for both, and total disagreement. Because his command runs the opposite way. Where they say escape the earth, he says the sentence that his entire philosophy is built on, remain faithful to the earth. Remember that phrase. When we reach the cure, it becomes everything. The second phase is quieter and far more dangerous, because it doesn't look like nihilism at all. Nietzsche ties it to Christianity. The Christian is not in despair, he is comforted. He has heaven, redemption, a benevolent God, a cosmic ledger where every tear is finally wiped away. For 2,000 years, Christianity was the great antidote to meaninglessness. It gave suffering a purpose. So where is the nihilism? Here is his most famous and most misunderstood image, the madman who runs into the marketplace at noon with a lit lantern, searching for God, while the crowd laughs, "Whither is God?" I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? And then the line that echoes through the whole 20th century, God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. Listen to the anguish in that. This is not a smug atheist scoring a point. It is a man describing a catastrophe. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What water is there to clean ourselves? Because the death of God is not the death of one belief. It is the collapse of the entire structure that held Western meaning together for 2 millennia. When the Enlightenment and modern science quietly dissolved the old foundations, showing us our smallness in an ancient, indifferent cosmos, showing us we are the accidental product of evolution. A brief flicker in the flux of becoming and perishing, they did not merely retire one hypothesis. They removed the sun that every other value had been orbiting. And most people, Nietzsche says, have not yet felt what they've done. The madman looks at the laughing crowd and says, "I have come too early." This deed is more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves. That is disorientation. The old map is gone. We keep walking as if it were noon, but the sun is unchained, and we are plunging in every direction at once. And here's the part that should make the hair on your neck stand up. That's not 1882 anymore. That is a description of now. The third face is, in Nietzsche's eyes, the very worst, and it is the one staring back at you from every screen you own. He calls this figure the last man. And unlike the despairing nihilist or the disoriented Christian, the last man is not suffering. He is not lost. He is comfortable, perfectly, smugly content. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "Behold, I show you the last man." What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? Thus asks the last man. And he blinks. He blinks. That one word does enormous work. Offered the possibility of greatness, of love, of creation, of a star, he simply blinks, uncomprehending, and turns back to his comfort. We have invented happiness, say the last men, and they blink. Here is the trick the last man has pulled. He hasn't overcome nihilism. He has lowered the bar so far that it can be cleared without effort. He wants nothing hard, risks nothing, aspires to nothing. and the machinery of the modern world is built to keep him there. Think about it, he sinks into the couch, the autoplay ticks over to the next episode, and after 4 hours the screen itself gently asks him the single most honest question in the entire culture: are you still watching? And he is. Of course he is. He always is. It is the last man's question, asked by his own television, and he doesn't even hear it. And the horrifying part? By every ordinary measure he seems fine. He focuses on this life, which is what Nietzsche wanted, but attaches himself only to its lowest values. His culture is a culture of entertainment. He finds nothing worthwhile precisely where something profoundly worthwhile is standing right in front of him. He blinks in the face of the star. This, Nietzsche insists, is nihilism in its most complete and terminal form. Not the scream of despair, not the confusion of the lost, the contented shrug of a creature that has forgotten there was ever anything higher to reach for. Behind Schopenhauer, Buddhism and Christianity, Nietzsche sees a single hidden engine, the ascetic ideal, the ancient impulse to renounce the earth, deny the body, live in poverty, humility and chastity, and treat this world as a mere bridge to a truer world beyond. Nietzsche is brutally fair here. The ascetic ideal worked. It gave suffering a meaning, and for a suffering creature, any meaning beats none. A man can endure almost anyhow if he has a why. The ascetic gave humanity a why. But it was bought at a terrible price. It taught us to hate the only world we actually have. It smuggled a slow poison into earthly life, the conviction that being alive, being a body, being here, is something to escape. Nietzsche calls it, unforgettably, a will to nothingness, a will turned against life itself. And this is the thread tying his whole project together. Behind every aphorism, every hammer blow, there is one obsession: life affirmation. That is the entire point. He wrote for the few who could hear it, which is why he subtitled Zarathustra a book for all and none. Put the three faces in a row and something chilling appears. A trajectory, a descent. Christianity, for all his fury at it, at least prized lives devoted to more than animal satisfaction. Schopenhauer and the Buddha, strangely, did too, honoring a saintly self-negation as the highest human condition. Nihilistic, yes, but they still ache for higher values. They still know the stars exist, even if they point at the wrong ones. The last man has lost even that. For him, the highest values have no value at all. He has made everything small, and he is proud of it. And here is why this is a warning to the world and not just a lecture. The same collapse that produces the blinking last man can, in other souls, produce something far more violent. When people no longer know what to do with their lives, when the old meaning is dead and no new meaning has been built, that vacuum does not stay empty. It gets filled, sometimes by conformism, the slide into the last man, but sometimes by mass movements, by a hunger for destruction, by the promise of a cause that will finally tell you who you are and who to blame. Nietzsche did not live to see it, but the 20th century filled the God-shaped hole with ideology, with the state, with the crowd, and it produced 2 world wars and horrors that scarred humanity permanently. He predicted the marketplace would be empty. He did not fully foresee what would rush in to occupy it. We did. That is the warning, and we are still living inside it. So is nihilism a sentence we simply serve? Not for Nietzsche. In the notebooks he draws the distinction everything turns on. Nihilism, he says, is ambiguous. There is active nihilism, a sign of the increased power of the spirit, and passive nihilism, its decline and recession. Passive nihilism is exhaustion. The spirit gives up, resigns, seeks rest in the old comforts of the ascetic ideal, or numbs itself in the last man's warm little happiness. the will shrinking in the face of the void. Active nihilism is the opposite. It stares into the same emptiness, the same death of God, the same collapse of all inherited value, and instead of resigning, it reaches for the hammer. It says, if the old values are dead, then I will build new ones. The destruction is not an ending, it is a clearing of ground. The active nihilist is not a victim of meaninglessness. He is a creator standing in the ruins, ready to lay a new foundation. And Nietzsche gives the human being who completes that task a special name. He does not call him a nihilist at all. He calls him the Übermensch. Let's kill the most persistent myth about this man for good. People call Nietzsche a nihilist because he took a hammer to values humanity had guarded for millennia. But look at what he was actually doing. He called his method philosophizing with a hammer, and everyone pictures him smashing idols to rubble. That is not the image he meant. The hammer is a tuning fork. You tap the idol gently, and you listen. And when you hear that hollow ring, you know the God inside was never solid to begin with. He wasn't destroying real values. He was exposing dead ones, posing as living gods. He saw nihilism as an inevitability. The old values were already collapsing under their own weight. And his response was not to mourn, but to hurry the fall and get to the rebuilding. What is falling, he said, that one should also push. That is not the sentence of a nihilist. That is a surgeon performing a necessary amputation. His goal was never the void. It was what he called the revaluation of all values, a new table of the sacred, built not on a heaven above, but on this earth beneath our feet. So what does that new table contain? 3 ideas braided together. The Übermensch, the overman, the overhuman, is his answer to nihilism made flesh, not a blonde conqueror. That is a grotesque distortion of what he wrote. He is the human being who overcame the disease from the inside. He gazed into the abyss, felt its full weight, and did not blink. Where the last man asks, "What is a star?" and shrugs, the Übermensch becomes one. "I teach you the Übermensch," says Zarathustra. Man is something that shall be overcome. He is the meaning we give to the earth, not handed down from the sky, but forged by a human being strong enough to create it. The will to power is the engine underneath, not the will to dominate other people, in its highest form, the will to master oneself. The lifelong, grinding, exhilarating work of self-overcoming, of becoming who you are. And here Nietzsche redefines happiness itself. Happiness is not the last man's warm cocoa. It is the specific feeling of overcoming a resistance, the surge of struggling against an obstacle and prevailing, which means suffering and difficulty are not the enemies of a meaningful life. They are its raw material. The higher values are hard-won. They come from the very striving the last man is desperate to avoid. The eternal recurrence is the final test, the heaviest weight he ever set down. Imagine, he says, a demon creeps into your loneliest loneliness and says, "This life, exactly as you have lived it, in every detail, every pain, every shame, every joy, you will live again and again, infinitely, with nothing ever new." Would you throw yourself down and curse the demon? Or answer, yes again, and infinitely again? That question is a scalpel. Only one kind of person can say yes without flinching, the Übermensch, because he is the supreme affirmer of life. He doesn't merely tolerate his existence. He loves it so completely he would demand every atom of it back, forever. And that love has a name. The most beautiful phrase Nietzsche ever wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati." That one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Amor Fati. Love of fate, Not resignation, not gritted teeth, a fierce, grateful yes to the whole of your life, the wounds included. For 2,000 years, Nietzsche says, we exiled our paradise to a beyond. We took everything precious and shipped it off to a heaven we'd only reach after death, while treating the actual, breathing, here and now as a waiting room to be endured. His entire project is to reverse that shipment, to bring paradise back down, to teach us that the world around us matters more than any world beyond it, that this is the home of every higher value we were taught to seek elsewhere: beauty, excellence, creativity, love, the whole of human greatness, not up there, right here, where it always was. Some people will not be able to bear this, and Nietzsche knows it. For them, the old life-negating comforts really are gentler, and nihilism is more survivable than the truth. But for those who can make the shift, who can stop postponing their lives to an imaginary afterward and learn to want this one fervently, exactly as it is, he offers what he called a pagan salvation. Not a rescue from the world, a homecoming to it. Which brings us back to that street in Turin. Here is the almost unbearable irony, and I'm not going to soften it, because Nietzsche would have despised me for softening it. The man who preached Amor Fati, love your fate, want nothing different, not in all eternity, was, in the end, broken by his own. Years of illness, of migraines and near blindness, of a loneliness so total, he once wrote that he was searching for men and found only fragments of men. And on that January morning, seeing a horse whipped in the street, the great affirmer of life threw his arms around it and wept for a suffering he could no longer bear, and his mind went dark. He spent his final 11 years unable to understand the books that would make him one of the most important thinkers who ever lived. You can read that as the failure of his philosophy. I'd ask you to read it the other way. Nietzsche never claimed the affirmation of life was easy. He called the eternal recurrence the heaviest weight. He said he wrote for all and none. He knew, better than anyone, how much the yes would cost, because he was paying it the whole time. That the payment finally exceeded what one broken body could carry does not make the teaching false. It makes it human. So here is his warning to the world, laid bare. The sun has been unchained, the old meaning is dead, and we killed it, not out of malice, but out of honesty. That was the necessary act. But it left us plunging through infinite nothing, with two roads out. The first is the last man's. Lower your standards. Numb the ache. Trade the star for the screen, let the autoplay ask if you're still watching, and never answer. Most of the modern world is on that road right now, and from the inside, it feels like comfort. The second is harder, and it is the only one worth walking. Pick up the hammer, push what is already falling, stand in the ruins and build values rooted in this earth, this body, this single irreplaceable life. Love your fate so completely you would live it again forever. Become the meaning the sky can no longer provide. Nietzsche did not write to comfort you. He wrote to wake you. The advent of nihilism, he said, was the history of the next 2 centuries, and we are standing in the middle of it. He left us with one question, the one the madman asked a sleeping crowd, the one that is really addressed to you. The star is right in front of you. Will you reach for it, or will you blink?